Gaming Memory Lane.
Get ready!
Alright, on today's episode of Memory Lane, we're going to be playing some Final Fantasy games. Briefly, just a little quick glimpse at these Final Fantasy games. I'm not good at these games at all. I don't really like RPG games that much, but I do have them in my collection. So yeah, we're going to be checking these out. And instead of me rating the games, you're going to be rating the games. So here is the rating system for Memory Lane.
Memory Lane rating system loading. 1-star rating equals horrible, real bad, trash. 2-star rating equals fair, good Randall, worth playing once. 3-star rating equals great, must own, possible hidden gem.
Alright, so it looks like the first game that we have on the list for Final Fantasy games is Chrono Cross. What would you guys rate Chrono Cross? Comment down below and let's take a look at the game. Alright, so right away when I see this game, and there's the box art right there. The game looks visually stunning. Look at this title screen right here. You have you're underneath the water and it looks really, really nice. And here's an example of some of the gameplay right here. And it's a very, very visually stunning game. You can definitely tell by the way it looks. Definitely has nice music also. And again, I'm not a huge RPG fan, but the visual aesthetics of this game were quite impressive. I thought this game actually looks pretty good. I would like to see a platformer with these type of graphics. That would have been pretty cool. And you can see we're walking inside of a building right here, and look at how nice and lush the graphics look right here. Now, as far as the storyline goes and stuff like that, I'm assuming that this is going to get a 3-star from you guys, as I'm guessing that this game is really, really good. I mean, the only thing I can really judge on the game is the graphics, and just look at that. This is crazy looking. It's like a huge beast came right out of the water, and it looks like we're running through like a little town right here or something like that. And I recorded probably a couple minutes worth of footage of this game just so you guys can see visually what this game looks like. And I'm probably willing to bet that you guys are going to give this a 3-star. I remember back in the day that this game went for quite a bit of money. Like, it was definitely in the $80, $90 range over where I lived at GameStop. For some reason, this game was highly priced. Like, the price value on this game was way more than a normal game. And that would be Chrono Cross for the PlayStation. Alright, the next game that we have here for Final Fantasy games is Chrono Trigger. And Chrono Trigger belongs to one of these compilations right here. Of course, we have Final Fantasy IX right here. We also have Final Fantasy VII. But let's take a look at Chrono Trigger. What would you guys rate Chrono Trigger? Comment down below and let me know what you think. Alright, here we have Chrono Trigger for the PlayStation. This originally came out on the Super Nintendo. And you can see we have a little bit of a gameplay of what the game looks like here. And it definitely has the Super Nintendo style graphics, as you can see here. It's pretty much identical as far as I can see. Top down 2D sprites. Can't get any better than that. You have basically a whole world you can walk around right here. Look at this. Some pretty cool classic 2D graphics. How do you guys rate Chrono Trigger? I know this game was quite popular back in the day. I have no preference on role-playing games whatsoever. It's not my type of game. But for Super Nintendo standards, the game looks actually pretty cool. Nice looking graphics. For PlayStation standards, it could have been better on the PlayStation, of course, but this is a re-release from the Super Nintendo. Is there actually any graphical differences between the Super Nintendo and the PlayStation version? I'm not even sure. I mean, it looks kind of the same to me. It doesn't look any different. And you can see that there is a bit of a storyline right here. Alright, when I was playing this, you bump into that girl, then before you know it, she's your friend. And all kinds of crazy stuff going on here. I do like the graphics. I do like the lush greenery. And again, I would love to see like a platformer game with these type of graphics. You know, like an adventure platformer. You know, something like that. You know, look at this crazy like little concert that's going on here. What would you guys rate Chrono Trigger on the PlayStation and the Super Nintendo? Rate both of them down below. Alright, so we're going to be taking a look at the very first Final Fantasy game right here. It's Final Fantasy. It's like a remake, re-release for the PlayStation. Is that any good? I'm going to let you guys decide down below. This game came with a compilation. Off the top of my head, I don't know which Final Fantasy compilation it is, but I have the disc in my binder. But the compilation came with a few games. Probably Final Fantasy 1 and 2, I would imagine. Let's take a look at it. And again, you guys rate the game down below. Let's take a look at Final Fantasy, the first one. Alright, here we have the very first Final Fantasy game from Final Fantasy Origins. Remade on the PlayStation, and this game originally was on the NES. You can definitely see all the different Final Fantasy characters right here in the top-down view. And here's an example of what the combat looks like. And what exactly do you guys rate this game? The first Final Fantasy, would you actually rate this 1 star, 2 star, or a 3 star? And how does it rank up against other Final Fantasy games? Is it like one of the best of all times? Or is it just one that you would pass over and play another Final Fantasy? I want to know down below. And as you can see right here, the graphical style definitely looks like something from Super Nintendo. But the original Final Fantasy was 8-bit, so it definitely looked quite a bit different. It did not look quite this nice. And it'd be nice to see like a comparison between this and the first Final Fantasy on the NES. And here we are, we're just showing off an example of what it looks like, just walking around a dungeon and showing off the gameplay right here. I'm not a huge Final Fantasy or role-playing fan at all, so I'm not an expert at any of these games. I can't tell you what the characters are or anything like that. But I'm gonna let you guys be the experts down below, and there's definitely some huge graphical differences between the original and this one right here. That's all I can tell you. And it looks like, I wonder if this game was originally supposed to be remade on the Super Nintendo, and they decided to put it on the PlayStation instead, because that's kind of like what it looks like. It looks definitely very, very Super Nintendo-ish. Rate the game down below and let me know what you think. Alright, the next game right here is a classic re-release on the PlayStation. It's Final Fantasy II. And there's tons of... I don't own every single Final Fantasy game, by the way, so there will be a couple that are missing in this video. Those you can mention down below and just give them your rating. But I have a lot of Final Fantasy games. I don't have any desire to play them except for this video. So let's take a look at Final Fantasy II, and what would you rate Final Fantasy II? Alright, here we have Final Fantasy II, part of the Final Fantasy Origins collection. And you can see right here, this is basically a graphical upgrade, re-release from the original NES version of Final Fantasy II. And this is pretty cool, because if you actually remember playing Final Fantasy II on the Famicom or NES, this is actually basically the same thing, but it looks much, much better. It's like a 16-bit look to it. I can give it a little example of what the combat looks like on this game. You got your traditional Final Fantasy combat. It's turn-based. And some really, really impressive looking graphics on the PlayStation for 2D standards. It actually looks pretty good. I would say it definitely looks slightly better than a Super Nintendo game. What would you guys rate Final Fantasy II on the PlayStation and the NES? Do you guys remember playing this on the NES back in the day? I think I might actually own the first Final Fantasy game on the NES somewhere in my collection. But I never actually played Final Fantasy II before. And again, I don't have any desire to play role-playing games. They're just not my type of game. But if you guys enjoy Final Fantasy games and you definitely remember playing this, How does this stack up to the other Final Fantasy games? I want you guys to rank them down below. And the game visually looks pretty decent. Not bad at all. So yeah, down below, I want to see your rating. I don't know exactly, is it a 1-star, 2-star, or a 3-star? Final Fantasy II for the PlayStation. Get your controller ready. So we're going to be playing some Final Fantasy IV, and what would you rate Final Fantasy IV? Let me know down below. Alright, here we have Final Fantasy IV, part of the Final Fantasy Chronicles collection. And this is basically a re-release of the Super Nintendo version of Final Fantasy IV. You can see right here it has pretty much close to the same graphics as far as I can see. If there's any differences, let me know. But it looks definitely like Super Nintendo graphics. The same stuff that you would see with Final Fantasy IV on the Super Nintendo. You got the an example of what the combat looks like right here. Turn-based. And, you know, pretty much standard looking Final Fantasy graphics during that era. 16-bit era. And if you guys are a fan of 16-bit Final Fantasy games, you actually might enjoy Final Fantasy IV quite a bit. You can see definitely how the graphics look here. They look pretty cool. And I believe that the audio is probably improved in comparison to the Super Nintendo version. And here we are navigating through the castle. When I was playing this game, I'm not a big, huge fan of role-playing games, so I was just walking around, checking everything out. We have the king of the castle right there. And I might sound absolutely stupid playing this game, because I'm not really good at Final Fantasy games at all. But if you guys enjoy classic Final Fantasy games, this might be for you. What would you rate Final Fantasy IV? And how would you rank it against other Final Fantasy games? Is this a good one or is it a bad one? I have no idea. I'm going to let you guys decide. It is part of the collection. You can definitely get it on the PlayStation, so let me know down below what you rate this game. Alright, the next game on the list we have Final Fantasy V, and I believe Final Fantasy V belongs to this compilation right here, as you can see. This is the Final Fantasy Anthology. And for Final Fantasy 1 and 2, I think I'm missing the actual cases for that. Not sure where it is. I have a ton of cases all over the place, but I have it in a binder right now. But this is definitely Final Fantasy 5 and 6 on this compilation right here. Final Fantasy Anthology. So let's take a look at Final Fantasy 5 and let's see exactly if it's good, is it bad? You guys decide. I'm going to have you guys comment down below. Alright, so here's Final Fantasy Anthology case right here, where you would find Final Fantasy V for the PlayStation. This game originally released on the Super Nintendo, and you can definitely tell it has that 16-bit look to it. And I believe it might be pretty close to the same as the Super Nintendo. And again, if there is any graphical differences, I want you guys to comment down below and let me know. And we have a dragon right there that's actually pretty cool looking. Look at this, it flies away. And there is some things aesthetically in Final Fantasy that I actually enjoy looking at. Like, the graphics are actually pretty cool looking. But I'm just not a fan of playing these games at all. I don't have the attention span to play these games. But if you guys do enjoy playing Final Fantasy games, I want you to rank Final Fantasy V. Like, where does it rank? Is it one of the better ones? Or is it just an average Final Fantasy game? Also, I want to know, what do you rate this game? Is it a 1-star, 3-star, or a 2-star? Is it just a rental game? Something you just want to go out and rent and bring it back? Like, how would you rate this game? And that looks like one of those chocobo birds. And what is happening here? It looks like a meteoroid is coming down. That is pretty cool. That definitely looks like something from Super Nintendo. And boom, it hit something right there. And the bird, the chocobo bird, I believe that's what that's called. It is running away. And I believe that right now I am actually controlling the bird. And there is the Tycoon Meteor. Just a little example of what the game looks like. And again, what would you guys rate Final Fantasy V? Let me know down below. Alright, the next game, Final Fantasy VI. Belongs inside this case right here. Final Fantasy Anthology. It comes with Final Fantasy V, 6 together. Let's take a look at the game and let's read it. I want you guys to rate it down below and let me know what you think. Alright, and here we have Final Fantasy VI on the PlayStation. And this is where things get really weird because Final Fantasy VI was on the Super Nintendo. It was known as Final Fantasy VI over in Japan, but it was known as Final Fantasy III over here in the United States. And I don't know exactly the whole background story on that, but it's just really, really bizarre how it became like two different, like numerical, how it became like Final Fantasy III here and Final Fantasy VI there. Like, what the hell is going on? Like, how did the numbers get mixed up like that? Really, really nice looking graphics. Looks pretty cool. And I believe that Final Fantasy VI is definitely known to be one of the better Final Fantasy games. I'm going to let you guys decide that down below. I want you to rank Final Fantasy VI up against the other Final Fantasy games and let me know how good it is. And how exactly does Final Fantasy VI rate? Is it a 1-star, not so good game, 2-star, just a rental, or is it a 3-star, a masterpiece, like a must-own? And it's safe to assume that this is going to be a 3-star. And I kind of like that mech suit, whatever that is. I'm not sure what that would be called, but it looks pretty awesome. And here's a little example of what the combat looks like in the game, turn-based. And they have like these mech-looking suits. It looks pretty cool. And I've always heard some good things about Final Fantasy VI, but again, I'm not really a role-playing fan at all. So I have really no business actually speaking on the game's behalf, except for maybe the graphics and the audio. And I know graphically it looks good. So what would you rate this game down below? Let me know. Alright, the next game right here is probably obviously the greatest of all time, Final Fantasy VII. And we have the Black Label copy of Final Fantasy VII right here. And let's take a look at Final Fantasy VII. And what would you guys rate this game? I'm pretty sure I'm going to see all 3-star ratings down below. This game is like the best Final Fantasy game on the PlayStation. So let's take a look at it. Alright, here we have Final Fantasy VII, perhaps the greatest Final Fantasy game of all time. It has a really, really good reputation, and this game kind of started the whole cinematic thing, but it did it right though. It actually blended the cinematics with the gameplay, and it actually made sense that this game had cinematics in the game. And once you get to like Final Fantasy VIII, you'll see Final Fantasy VIII has way too much cinematics and stuff in it. This game actually did it right. And the graphics and the gameplay are exactly what you would want in a Final Fantasy game. And I definitely like stuff like this. I mean, look at this. Some good mixture of gameplay and cinematics. Now, I'm not a huge Final Fantasy fan, but I have to admire how they Square Enix designed this game. This game is actually very well designed. It probably took them a while to do it. Allegedly, this game was originally designed for the Nintendo 64, and I guess that went downhill. So they decided to put it over on the PlayStation instead. It actually would have been pretty cool to see Final Fantasy VII on the N64, in my opinion. I think that would have been pretty cool. Nonetheless, this is actually what the game looks like on the PlayStation. It looks actually really, really great. I think it looks awesome. And what would you guys rate Final Fantasy VII? I'm expecting to see all 3-star ratings. And how does this rank against other Final Fantasy games? I want to know down below. Is there another Final Fantasy game on the PlayStation that you guys like better? Maybe Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy IX, who knows? Comment down below and let me know what you think. This game, in my opinion, it looks awesome. I think it's pretty cool. Alright, next up we got Final Fantasy VIII on the PlayStation, and I used to have the cases. I don't know where it is at the moment. But let's go take a look at Final Fantasy VIII, and what would you guys rate this game? Is it a 1-star, 2-star, or 3-star? Let's take a look. Alright, here's Final Fantasy VIII for the PlayStation, and for someone that plays Final Fantasy games very casually, I'm not a big fan of this. It's very, very heavily cinematic based, and I would say that this is probably the game that pretty much forced cinematics on you, like, a lot. As you can see here, tons and tons of cinematics, and they look pretty good. I'll give them that. It definitely looks like PS3 or PS4 graphics. And once you get past the cinematics, this is what you get. You're laying in the bed, you're tired, he's been sleeping for like who knows how long, while all those cinematics were playing, and now he's getting up, he doesn't know where the hell he is. And there's a huge graphical difference in this game compared to Final Fantasy VII. It almost looks like they try to make the game look more realistic and kind of look like a Resident Evil type game or something. And I don't really like the graphic style in this game. I prefer how Final Fantasy VII looked, and Final Fantasy IX looked actually pretty good too. This one right here, I'm just not a big fan of it. It looks like character models that came out of a Resident Evil game or something. And there we go, I bumped into one of the characters in this game. And nonetheless, the graphics do look good, but I'm not a fan of the graphics style, that's all. How would you guys rate Final Fantasy VIII? Do you think this game is actually good? 1-star, 2-star, 3-star? And how do you rank it against other Final Fantasy games? Is it one of the better Final Fantasy games? Or is it not so good compared to others? Let me know down below. Alright, the next one on the list right here is Final Fantasy IX, what we have right here. Now, Final Fantasy IX, I actually had a little bit of fun running around playing this game a little bit. It's actually, this is out of all the Final Fantasy games besides 7, this is actually a little bit appealing to me. Like, I don't care for role-playing games, but this one is actually pretty fun. Let's take a look at Final Fantasy IX, and I want to know what you guys rate the game down below. Alright, here we have footage of Final Fantasy IX, and that's what the box art looks like. And right away, the cinematics are much more detailed and crazy looking. It's a very, very cinematic Final Fantasy game. And I would say that pretty much started at Final Fantasy VIII, in my opinion. All the cinematics, like really, really crazy cinematics. And then we have the actual gameplay right here, and I love the character models on Final Fantasy IX. I think that these character models would have been great for like an action-adventure platformer. But nonetheless, I actually had a pretty decent handful of fun playing this game on the PlayStation. And I normally don't like playing any role-playing games whatsoever, but this game was actually kind of drew me in a little bit. It was a little different. The character models definitely drew me in, and the scenery graphics and all the stuff that was going on around me. You see this little details like that. That little guy just bumped into me and just ran straight off in the distance. And look at the graphics here. Some of the best looking graphics on the PlayStation, in my opinion. I think it looks pretty cool. And then we have a very, very famous Final Fantasy character right here. Look at this. Some really, really nice looking graphics on the PlayStation. It looks really good. And here we have a little area where you can just walk around and explore. You know, there's little side missions you can do and all kinds of stuff. And check this out right here. Apparently they ran out of vaccines, and someone is being a Final Fantasy Kieran about it. Oh my god, he's getting mad. And there he goes, he ran off, and that was that. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed watching this Final Fantasy video. I made it for you guys. I don't really like playing role-playing games at all. But if you like playing Final Fantasy games and role-playing games, I will probably make another role-playing video with other role-playing games. And I will have you guys rate the video down below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, comment down below, and let me know what you think.